Welcome back, Outliers. This is Tyler Ardron, your host of the Millennial Outlier podcast. As always, Justin's with me. Justin, how you been, dude?
What's up, brother? Doing amazing. You know me, best day ever, every day.
Oh, love that. So, yeah, it's just me and you, man. Since the last episode,
Feels like it's
episode 1.
been forever, right?
I know. So yeah, I figured on this episode we could kind of summarize some of the key points in the last episodes that we've done, key takeaways, and we'll just touch on a little bit on each episode and really give the listeners an opportunity to, if you hear like a thing that you were super interested in, go back and listen to that episode because there's a ton of great gems. We're already on episode, I think 7 or 8. Mm-hmm. It's flew by, man. Don't you think? Crazy.
It sure has. It's been such a cool journey. Remember we talked about the first episode, 90% of people quit after the third one. Next 90% quit after the 21st. And we're going to be at 22 quicker than we know it.
Crazy and faster now because we just to give you a little listener background on like where we've come so far. I think we started in maybe March or something. We were originally doing one a month, and we just got a ton of great feedback, and people were asking for more, which is crazy. So me and Justin talked, and we're like, why don't we just do two a month and every other week? And we've been doing that now. I think the 2 episodes ago, we started releasing two a week, and it's been going awesome.
Yeah.
So
that's definitely, and as a reminder as well. So on top of doing the recaps, we are going to end this with some networking do's and don'ts, because that's a big part of what Tyler and I do. And we know not everybody is, comfortable or seasoned. So, hopefully we can give you some tactical guides and takeaways for action. That's just going to help your business and kind of make you more comfortable in those situations as well.
Awesome. So let's get this thing started. So episode 1, it was just us, and we kind of talked about where we're going with the direction of the podcast. So I didn't really want to talk too much about that, being it was just us. Wanted to really more focus on our guests and stuff. So episode 2, Unleashing the Power of Social Media, Faith, and Business Coaching. We had our friend, mentor for the two of us and coach right now, Devin Dinofa. We were joined by who's an entrepreneur, he's a realtor, he's a coach. We spoke to the power of social media, the role faith plays in our lives, and why having a business coach is essential. So, what were your kind of practical takeaways that Devin covered?
Big things with Dev that I always kind of speak on is with his faith specifically. Before I started my faith journey, which was a big portion, started because of him, he would always tell me how like the Bible was like the best book for not only life, but for business. And I was always like, dude, what are you talking about? Like that is, and then as I've gotten in the word more, you realize that a lot of these lessons, they are more implied for life, but life and business are so parallel with just relationships and having proper foundations. And it is amazing how many things you can take from, even now, like I thought I was supposed to read like, a chapter, right, in the Bible. And you realize like sometimes you only need like
a verse,
a couple lines, might not even be the full verse, right? And there's just so much substance in the way it's written as well. Like you might have to check the note side. I have like the Bible for Dummies, basically, that like gives you all the history because sometimes you just don't know things. But that and Devin's like relentless taking of action.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think Devin is the epitome of you don't have to have like a concrete plan. You have to have a structured idea of what you want to do. But as we were talking in episodes before, like you have to take the action. You could go to all the seminars, you can read all the books, you can consume all the YouTube stuff. But if you don't actually take that leap of faith and start to do rather than just digest, you're never really going anywhere. It's like, people mistake like progress, like they're basically running on the treadmill. Like, yeah, you're moving, but you're not actually going anywhere. Yep. Like you got to get out there and actually move.
Yeah. And, to that point with taking action, it's, a lot of people get stuck in looking at every possible angle and what could possibly happen, what negative could happen. Whereas if you just take the action, and get started, those things might not happen or they might. And if they do, it's a learning opportunity. You're never going to be able to hypothesize how it's going to go. Mm-hmm. Whether it's you're starting a company, whether it's you're starting investing in something or, whatever, you can sit there all day and try to think of, what could go wrong. But The biggest thing is just getting started, because you can spend 5 years on thinking what could go wrong. Whereas if you started 5 years ago, you have now 4 years of experience, you have 4 years of learning and, all that good stuff. So, that's kind of
analysis through paralysis, right? It's one of those, I was talking to Gina about this the other day, actually, because I'm definitely an internal optimist for the most part. And Gina's a little bit more on the pessimist side, right? And I always say to her, I'm like, when you go through these things, the first thing you always think about is like the worst possible outcome.
Yep.
And for me, I'm the opposite. I think of like the best possible outcome. And you kind of have to know yourself and be self-aware of that, because sometimes I have to dial back. Like maybe in my mind, I'm like, oh, well, the worst thing that could happen is this, which is the best possible scenario. And I have to know that, all right, maybe I should break that down a little bit and find some more risks in it. Where Gina's the opposite, and like she goes to that worst thing. And I'm like, well, how about if you gave yourself a cap of like, here are some of the good things that could happen as well. Yeah. So that's something to keep in mind. Like, know yourself. If you're a pessimist, then you're going to go to like the craziest worst case situations, and you're going to convince yourself that that's what's going to come to fruition. Yeah. Remember, the energy you put out there is what you attract. So if all you think is it's going to be a failure and it's it's just going to be a money pit, chances are it's going to be, because that's the mindset and the belief you've put into that.
Yeah. I mean, I can't agree more. And it's even little stuff. Like, it doesn't have to be starting a business or investing, whatever, $1 million into something. It's little stuff too. And Devin pointed it out with, like, say, social media, thinking too much into a post, or little stuff like that, could analysis is paralysis, could stop you from getting that next deal because you didn't put that post that person saw, and everything like that. And I think just that the biggest thing is, taking action.
Yeah. Because people enjoy the journey, right? Like I was doing a business interview thing during the pandemic, because I was like, I don't want to call businesses and like cold call them and telemarket trying to get an appointment, because it's just everybody, there's all this craziness, uncertainty. So what kind of value can I bring? And just started on Zoom, just recording them with people, talking about why they started their business. And the first episode, I didn't know you had to click that like mirror my background. So like the payday logo was backwards, my name was backwards. And my wife was like, you can't post that. And I was like, the hell I can't.
Yeah, why not?
I'm going to post it. And guess what? The second episode is going to visibly be better.
Right.
The third episode,
and in all honesty, people probably didn't even think of that. Like, I watched all your videos. I don't remember that. You know?
And it's just authentic. And anybody who caught it, it's probably funny. They laughed and like, Justin, big dope. Like, you got to click that button. But it was a learning process, right? Yeah. It was something I had to go through and experience. And if I didn't take the action, I would have just sat there and be like, oh, well, what if I don't do this? What if I don't do that?
Right.
So,
right. Yeah. Definitely. So moving on, episode 3 here, we have one of my personal favorites, Mama's Boys. And now what we talked about here, we had, obviously our mothers in, Gina, my mom, and your mom, Renee, Justin. And we got pretty personal. We got vulnerable. We talked about, them raising us and experiences we've learned through them. We talked about parenting, successes in that, as well as business and their entrepreneurial, journey. So what are some of the key takeaways you got there?
Man, I feel like our whole lives are the takeaways from that, right? Yeah. Like, we've learned what the example of a parent was from both of our mothers. We've learned what hard work ethic, just grit, what those were. And just from their stories, like you kind of forget, because they're our parents, like some of their own struggles that they went through, whether we were too young to understand them. And it's just a reminder, like, my mother always loves to say, and I think she said in that episode of, a lot of people see her life today and they're like, man, must be nice. I would want that. And she's always said, like, you can't just have today. You have to take all 54 years. Yeah. I think that's important, always keeping in perspective, because like, we all have a story. We all came from something. We overcame something as well. And I think too often we push all that to the wayside and we're like, no, I see him now. I see Tyler, nice house, cool cars, doing these things. Like, life's just always been a cakewalk, and we discredit a lot of the work that people have put in. And I think that's really just seeing what our mothers now, right, speaking of processes, like what 37 years and 31 years? 32 years of like that constant progression, like what they've both accumulated. Like, both of our moms kind of started in industries that weren't anything like great for them. Like my mom was in the restaurant industry.
My mom was like a secretary.
Yeah, the secretary.
Some random office. Yeah.
And they both were like, you know what? I'm meant for more than this.
Yeah.
And I'm going to bet on me. And I'm pretty sure, and I'm sure our fathers had a play in that too. We don't want to discredit them, but those examples are probably what led us to have the entrepreneurial spirits that we do.
Yeah, 100%. It was just super cool to do because I've never really done anything like that with, my mom. And it gave, to your point, it gave a real look behind the scenes of our dynamics and how, why we are what we are. And it was just, really cool.
And to your point with that, I think it's a beautiful moment because it's kind of part of all of our legacies now, right? Like that's on YouTube forever.
Yeah.
So that's like something like, grandbabies, great grandkids, like they'll be able to see that. And especially them frozen in that moment of time. Right?
It's so crazy. I never, I think I've thought of that before maybe, but when you say it now, it's like, that's just so crazy that, we weren't able to do that with our grandparents. Like, I don't know what my pup, who's not with us anymore. I don't know what he looked like when he was like, by other than like a 1950 photo that was like crazy to see. Like, you can't relate to it because you're like, that looks like it was from forever ago.
Absolutely.
But like being able to go on like my social media, my grandson doing it, say, and like looking back, like that's so crazy.
Yeah, it's like how often, right, do you get the info from the horse's mouth?
That's why
everything we've learned about our prior generations has just been passed down, and we've all played the whisper game, right? Like the whole message is construed by like the second generation because we embellish a little bit, make people sound a little better than they were, or maybe worse, depending on our relationship with them. And like we have that hour and 5 minutes just frozen in time that paints a great picture of at least where we were as of today, and kind of what the story was to get us there.
Yeah, that's just gonna be really cool 20 years from now. Like looking back, and be like, man, I remember that.
Yeah, people. I think it's something people should do. It's up there with like writing a book, right? Like it's something that nobody can ever take away from us.
Right. Crazy, but. Yeah, that was one of my favorites. So moving on to the next one, episode number 4 from hashtags to influence. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make this one because I was in a meeting, but of course I've listened to it. I wish I was here because, there's so many awesome gems and Matt's a really cool dude. But this one was about social media influence. And you talked with, Matt Groark, who's made a name for himself in the social media world, from the barbecue and being on TV and just a really cool journey and super cool for me now to follow him because I didn't follow him before. And seeing his stories of everything he's doing and all the success he's having is really awesome to see. But what were your key takeaways being here in person with him?
Well, for him, it was like just something you're passionate about to share it with the world. Yeah. I mean, I love his story of like his father-in-law just like dropping off, the little like portable grill,
thing, whatever it was. Yeah.
And like his father-in-law had no idea that it was going to like change his life forever and the trajectory of their family. So I love that. And kind of how he somewhat downplayed like how the production, like it doesn't have to be. Yeah. You don't need just $10,000 where it was like phone, a decent microphone for sound, and then an editing tool that you'll use, which he was using InShot, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. But it's cool to see now just because of what he's done. So we kind of teased what he had coming up, and their Embers TV is now live. So make sure to go check that out.
Super cool.
It's going to be its own social media platform for chefs of all strategies and social media influencers. So it'll definitely be something worth watching. But what I thought was even cooler, if you've kept up with him, so Matt was a gym teacher in the Washington Township School District, and just with his buzz, notoriety, passions, they switched him over, and he's now the head of the culinary arts department. Which I thought they got rid of most of that stuff. Like that's usually like home economics, like the stuff that we kind of had when we were growing up. Usually that's the budget cut.
Yeah,
and
like wood shop and
absolutely. And Matt is now in that role with Washington Township, and of course because of his channel partnership.
Is he still a gym teacher?
I don't believe so. I think he's strictly doing that now. And his like back to school post was thanks to a lot of his channel partners. he was literally coming with like all this cool gear and like contraptions and all these different tools, to help these kids. Because it's like it doesn't hurt to know how to cook, right? Like it's very important.
Seriously. And a grilled chicken, that's about it.
Yeah, and B, like you might, kids who just aren't into the typical academics, like this is something that's now going to speak to them, and they can see like, wow, I could actually create a career path if I follow the blueprint that
and unconventional.
Mr. Groark's done. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like I got to be a chef at some crazy 5-star restaurant. You can go out on your own like he's done and made a name for himself. And, he didn't really have that background, to your point, with his father-in-law or dad, whatever it was, dropping that grill off at his house because he didn't, he got it for himself and he never used it. So he gave it to him. And, he just starts learning it. He starts watching YouTube videos he was talking about, and, really found that passion for it. And, he didn't like go up and get a job at Chipotle afterwards. He was like, I'm going to do this my way. And that's something that we're fortunate to have now with social media and all that stuff, that you can do that.
Yeah. And also his when he was talking about kind of the investment or the sacrifice, however you want to look at it. But he was saying like how his wife would like give him flack all the time for being on his phone. And like, when you first start with the social media, like we were just saying with Devin, it's like you do overanalyze and you overthink. You're like, I think the verbiage should be. And he was like, he would always though like share the dream of like, this is one day, like my phone and this content is going to like change our lives. And like, and now, his wife, who was a principal, isn't working anymore. She gets to be with the kids, and he's able to provide for his family and shoot content and profit off of it almost all the time. Yep. And it's like, it's a beautiful thing to witness and just see how he continues to develop that and be so much more than just, an influencer or a content creator.
Yeah. And that's, being able to, being open to finding that passion, is super important too, because there's so many people in life that never really find that because they're not, open to it. Whereas, he learned it, found it, and acted on it. And it's really cool to see. And you could tell, that passion's there just by the way he talks and presents himself on social media. So, all right, moving on to the next episode we got here, episode 5. This was, I keep saying it, but this was another one of my favorites. So we had Flipping Fortunes, Real Estate and Entrepreneurship. Myself and you chatted with our good buddy Mario Lancioni, who is a real estate investor, over 100 doors he owns. That's on the rental side, flips multiple a month. And we dove into the world of real estate, the mindset needed, and how he navigates the highs and lows of every market. As we know, the real estate market, fluctuates so much. But this was a great episode for really anyone that's interested in real estate and getting into real estate. Being that, you really just have recently gotten into it. What takeaways did you, grab from it?
Honestly, just the, kind of realizing that you have to be an expert and like obsessed with real estate if you're going to be successful. Because to your point, it's a living thing. It's constantly changing. But with Mario, I was, kind of knowing, what's a good amount of cash to have to start. I didn't realize the importance of like the credit score, 4 different financing options, the Burr method. It was great to hear him talk about that and just, kind of recycling the funds to continue to invest. And for him, like having constant structure, I was very impressed by like processes. He has so many, like the two of you were like geeking out at the processes, but it's such an important thing because years ago, you didn't really have to have the tightest processes in your business and people were just crushing it. We had the bull economy going. And, since the pandemic, things have gotten a little tighter and you really see business owners exposed if they don't have good processes in place. Yeah. And we talked about the E-Myth, I think, during that one where in that book, they talk about it. It's not like getting A players that makes your business successful. It's having amazing processes that allow C players to have A results. Yep. And that was probably my biggest takeaway with him is it sounds like he could plug even my ignorance into his program. And I could be like a high performer through him.
Yep. And I think another part that plays into that is just with, being able, people learning, and we've talked about this in prior stuff, but being able to, learn this type of stuff and like investing and everything online and then acting on it. What that does though is create a bigger pool of people doing it. And then what that does is create, bad players, so to speak. And, processes, for example, is something that kind of sets him apart, from other investors and everything. And it's why he's successful in, what he does. And what I really took too from it is, just because I'm in the world of real estate and I talk to hundreds of people about it, you have those two kind of people, right? You have the one person who, right now it's not the greatest of markets with real estate. And you have people who complain about it and, use that as a reason of why they're not successful right now. Or you have people like Mario, who we talked, an hour with, and I talked to him, on the side too, who's never once said anything about like a bad market or anything like that. He's still super successful. He is super successful. And I don't think it's like a coincidence. And especially, I see it firsthand with my mother, who's, runs a brokerage in that, and she said it in a video too. It's you who needs to act on it. So like, what are you putting out there into the world, right? Like, are you keep saying, oh, the market's tough. There's no, there's not enough listings out there. I'm never able to help my clients. Or are you finding creative ways to help your clients, get those offers accepted or whatever it is to help your client find that investment property? It kind of back to that. And I think, that's important in your mindset. And that's really what stuck out to me is such a positive mindset and never once blaming something on, oh, well, I had to, because he brought it up. He had to sell like 50 rental properties or something because he wasn't making enough cash flow. He could have blamed the market and said, oh, well, rent value's down and this and that and this. Instead, he said, no, I made a mistake in my processes. I wasn't getting enough cash flow. So I had to exit that and, reevaluate how, we do things.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's the Tony Robbins, where focus goes, energy flows, right? So to your point, if it's everything's just bad, all you're putting out there is the bad energy. And one other thing actually that I wanted to highlight that he brought up, I loved when he talked about like selecting his mentors, how he needed to hear the pain in their voice. Yeah. Because I think too often, especially nowadays, we talk about this, everybody's a coach, right? And most people don't do their due diligence on the coach. And you have somebody who's only made money through coaching. They've never built anything. They've never had, the pain point that you're going through. They've just like repurposed Tony Robbins, or they've like things that they've digested.
They're good speakers.
Yeah, exactly. They're just very charismatic. They can kind of get you on board. But, the fact that he was like, I wanted to know in their track record that an issue I have now is something they overcame. I think that's a gem that a lot of people should take when looking for, that mentor, because it's the difference between, we talk about like seeking the opinion compared to seeking counsel. Yep. And he's doing that properly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a common denominator of, all these episodes, right? Devin Dinofa is a coach, also has paid thousands of money to coaches. Both our mothers, been to Tony Robbins events. They ain't cheap.
Yeah, it's like mayonnaise is six-figure coaching.
Yeah. So episode, right? We just go down the line of Mario, same idea, paying thousands of dollars. We're gonna get here shortly to Matt Brenner in the next episode, right? He mentioned he spent, I think it was like 60 G's in the period of like 3 years on coaching. Like, so these are very successful people that we've had on. Mario, for example, over 100 doors. You could say, oh, he made it. Why does he need to pay a coach? But these are people just like ourselves who want to continue to grow, find that mentor, take different perspectives, always looking to grow as opposed to knowing what you're doing because you're already successful and, kind of being stagnant.
Yeah, and I think as high achievers, there's that, it's a gift and a curse of never being satisfied. But it's not that we're not grateful or, blessed or, present with the success that we have. It's that we're around enough people that we realize like there's so many more levels. Yeah. So even to where we both think we are now, like I just made a post about this for my birthday, was that, I really wasn't excited to celebrate this year. When I was like looking back at the year, I felt like 35 and 36, I'd built so much more momentum and like had won huge Super Bowls, like losing the 80 pounds, like starting the faith journey and starting to do those Masogis where I'm doing something crazy each year. And this year I was like, I definitely took a little bit of a step back on my health. I put about 20 pounds on, so we're dialing that back in. I really felt like I had grown in my relationships. So, better father, better husband, better friend, better community guy. And then I looked at it, I was like, well, we started the podcast. That was something that was completely different. And
Yep.
we're building a lot of traction with, started the TV show that I'm on,
Yep.
and then had other ventures and things that were out of my comfort zone. And I realized that I was like, the one part of my brain that's never satisfied is like, this year was a loss. It was a failure. But the other side of my brain, which thankfully a lot of social media, like a lot of nice messages that came from people sent me videos, texts, whatever. And I needed to be reminded from the outside what people see in me and what people have received from me, what they get from the things I put out, to realize I've made more impact than I gave myself credit for.
Yeah, 100%. Like you said, it's a gift and a curse.
Mm-hmm.
The same, we're always going to be hard on ourselves. And that's the reason why we go get coached. And that's the reason why we pay people money to do it, is because we're like, we're not doing enough. Yeah. But from an outsider's perspective, we look like we're doing a ton and, all that good stuff. So, it's just about always being willing to grow, always being willing to ask somebody questions, always being willing to take someone's different perspective, whether you agree with it or not, because you don't know what's like going on inside that person's head. And, you always got to be just willing to learn, because if not, you're going to be stagnant and you're just going to coast through life and you're not going to have success.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be willing to learn to have success. You have to, because you're not going to be able to, you're not going to be able to get to that next level. You're just going to coast, on cruise control. So
couldn't agree more.
All right. So episode 6, From Pies to Profit, the Entrepreneur's Journey. We had our good buddy Joe on, and he went over facing challenges in his youth. It was a really crazy story that he got into about, his upbringing, how he made it to where he's at now of owning multiple pizza shops, was doing wholesaling, or still does a little wholesaling. And it's just, really a story of grit, determination, family, and just, a sheer will to succeed. So, what did you take from that?
I mean, honestly, the opening line that I had kind of used with him was, I think he is the epitome of, your decisions, not your situation, define the quality of your life. And there's a guy who lost his father at 14, I believe he was the second oldest of 7 siblings.
Yep.
Mother was kind of trying to figure it out, as he shared, like she didn't really have a great career path. Wound up like getting in with Wawa, and over the last 25 years building herself into like an integral part of what Wawa's corporate side is. And, just going in and out of the juvenile detention centers, it was impactful to hear when he kind of shared that he was at like that boot camp style thing. And one of the like instructors was basically like, dude, like I see these people all the time, and like, why are you here? Like, I don't see the evil in you. And to kind of, what I was just saying about sometimes we need that outside perspective to remind us, like, you're just making bad decisions right now. Like you're responsible for everything that happens to you. So straighten up, like walk, the tight and narrow road and do the things that you should do, rather than doing the easy things, as you were alluding to. Because if you're not growing, you're dying. There is no stagnant. There's no staying the same. You either get worse or you get better. You win every day or you lose the day. It's black and white.
Yeah.
And that was to see how he had like overcome all of that and create, because as we were saying earlier, a lot of times we take credit away from people, because we assume, if you look at Joe now, like I said, they're going to nice dinners, they go on these nice vacations, they have real estate, they have the pizza shops, and you're like, oh man, life must have been good for Joe. And then you hear that and you're reminded that, man, if he can overcome that, why am I letting this limiting belief or this story hold me back?
Yeah, 100%. And really to overcome that, back to what we were talking about, he had to be willing to learn. Mm-hmm. And he went into a ton about that, all the different books he read to get him to where he's at, having conversations with different coaches and mentors. He had to be willing to do that, or he would have been stuck in that trench or cesspool, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But he pulled himself out of it, with his will and being able to educate himself and being willing to educate himself, know?
And as he had mentioned, standing on the shoulders of giants, right? That was like a big line he used. And I love how he brought faith into that, because I kind of, when I have my daily prayers, part of what I pray for is that, God brings people into my life that I can help. Mm-hmm. But some people also bring people into my life that can help me. And it sounds like that was really what Joe, because he said, he was like, I don't always understand, right? Like, how often do we meet somebody who the first meeting, doesn't really click as to why. But then you spend more time with them, you get to know their backstory, and you're like,
That's right.
this is why you were brought into my life. This is where we're supposed to help each other.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. So, yeah, I really enjoyed that episode as well. And like I said, I guess it's a common theme because I keep saying it. But I might be biased.
Yeah.
So, episode 7, which was our last one, kicking it up a notch, building a karate empire with Matthew Brenner. Matthew Brenner is behind Action Karate's multiple studios. They're a franchisor. Also, he consults other karate studios across the country on how to be successful, how to convert leads, and all that good stuff. Also, websites. But he went into the process of being a franchisor, and a lot of good takeaways from that episode as well. What did you take away from that?
Honestly, with him, even though it's not exactly like what we talked about, but how important it is to be a good communicator. Like,
Yeah.
Matt is a very good communicator. We said, like, the flow of that podcast was one of the best because he also does one. He's very curious about things.
Yes.
But he was also, I loved hearing, like, another process guy. Like, he was all about the systems, keeping things tight, helping his brother who had already built some success, it sounds like, literally blow the roof off the building.
Yep.
And it's just, I think with him, he's kind of the example of, a lot of times we don't kill our ego in business, and we refuse to hire that person who has the different mindset or the different skills because we think everything we do is the best.
Yeah.
And he literally, I'm sure, obviously being your brother, you're going to give them a little bit more, rope, so to speak, and leeway. But I'm sure at one point his brother was like, "Why do I need you? I have 7 or 8 gyms. Like, right. I'm good. I'm building this." And to see, like I said, that they've gone into this whole other route and they've opened up the consulting side and they're doing the website conversions. It's just, you don't know what you don't know sometimes. And that's why it's beautiful to have, again, people with different strengths and skills than you do.
Yeah. And like you said, he's super curious, super good at holding a conversation and asking questions, and very, I don't know the word, but I guess charismatic, when he's
high energy.
Yeah, high energy. But also like not the high energy guy that you're like, that dude's on something. Like he's like coming at me with sales and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Like he's very good at asking the question and then kind of stepping back, but then bringing it back with that energy. And I think, there was a ton of takeaways in that. I just listened to it recently. I didn't know that much about the whole franchise model, and he kind of went into that, and I forget what the word was, but the difference between not like trademarking, but whatever the word is, to where they can use the rights to your name, but they can't.
That's right.
Yeah. And then he went also into being what the difference is between that and then being a franchisor, which I really didn't know nothing about, and I kind of grasped a little bit about how that model works, and super interesting, and you got to have. I guess you gotta have some balls to be able to, do something like that. He's got like 30 studios, in the area. So pretty crazy.
And again, kind of like you said, I mean, the common theme in almost all of these episodes, we've all invested in learning from others. Everybody was an athlete to some extent. Yeah. So for those who are afraid to get your kids involved in sports, look at just every person that I've personally had on. We have met on either a basketball court, football field, golf course. So there is something about just the proximity of being around people. And again, there's the camaraderie of sports, there's the competitive nature of sports, there's the discipline, there's all the things that translate to business. Yeah, the grit, all of it. It's, like Deion Sanders says, like most kids today just practice to practice.
Yeah.
Or like we're learning that we have to have ambitions and goals when we show up every day. We can't just go through the motions. We have to have this bigger picture in mind that we're working towards. And Coach Prime talks about every time I stepped on the field, I was practicing to be the greatest.
Yeah.
And I think that's the mindset we've both bought into, is how do we, and all these people we've had on, is how do we become the greatest in our industry?
Yep. Yeah.
And the greatest version of ourselves, more importantly.
Yeah, 100%. And back to, just educating, being willing to be educated, and all that good stuff. So I thought that was a great episode as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's the recap we got for everybody. Went by quick, and, a lot of lessons learned. And Definitely, if you caught something there that we summarized, look back at their episodes. We're on all the platforms, so feel free to check out one of those episodes as well, because we go really more in depth, a full hour into whatever those topics that we went over are. So
Yeah.
so let's move on to networking. So for me personally, about 90, and I brought this up before, about 90% of my business comes from word of mouth. And a big chunk of that's networking and relationships I've built and everything like that. And I know you're kind of, similar on your front, but why don't we just go into a little bit about how you got started with networking? Because I've been doing it since we opened, really, I guess 10 years now. And but so I guess going back, you meet so many different people, and there's a handful of people that have been with, that I've been networking with for 10 years. And you, though, I feel like I've been networking with you for 10 plus years, but every time, because sometimes we'll bring it up, I just got into sales in this year. I think it was 2019 or something. And it blows my mind because I feel, I don't know why, but because I feel like I feel like I've known Justin for 10 years, doing the networking. So obviously you're, doing something right, but what got you into networking, and what's been your journey with it?
Yeah, so the networking kind of just fell into my lap. I mean, I've always, again, been curious. I love to talk to people. So if you're in my proximity, I've probably struck up a convo with you. And those are kind of those natural abilities that I didn't realize would serve me later. But when we were going from me kind of transitioning, people my whole life were like, you should sell. But when we started the business, they needed me in the operations. So that's what I learned. And I learned that is not my strong suit, but I did well enough to kind of get us through the first 8 years. But the first event I went to was a Jersey Man event. So, one of our prior salespeople that had left us, he was a member, really through us. And I was like, I had met Ashley Dunnick at one of the Y. Used to do a 3-on-3 basketball tournament. I showed up, did well. We actually lost in the championship for that. And Ash was like, you should come out to an event. You guys are members. So I went out, and the first event I go to, there's 250 people in the room, and I was like, "Whoa!"
Oh,
I love to meet people, but it is overwhelming when you feel like you don't know anybody, and you're just walking into this room. So I just started to pick people off and think. I was like, all right, this is going to be overwhelming. People are standing in circles. It's kind of tight. I was at the Chicky and Pete's over in Philly. And, it's pretty packed with 250 people in there. So I was like, what is the easiest way that I can still have a good, intimate conversation with somebody without being rude? I was like, stand at the bar. So that's literally what I did the entire night. My first time, I sat at the bar. And anybody, again, that was in proximity in front or behind me in line, just strike up a conversation with them. And I started to learn through time of the quality of questions that you ask, is the quality of answers you'll get, and to not ask the typical. I think we've talked on previous ones. Yeah. How's business? Or, what do you do? That's literally one of my pet peeves. Of all the questions you could ask me, that's 10% of who I am. Right? But that was kind of how the journey started for me. And I really just found that adding value into every room that I walked into, it was never a sales thing. That's my other pet peeve. When you sell me, when we first meet, I'm like, you're already you're cut. You're not going to be on my email list. I'm probably never going to invite you to anything, because that's literally, you've showed me your agenda. You're only here to get something for you, not to give anything back. But how about for you? So that you've been doing it way longer than me. So what forced you to get outside of the office and actually start showing up to events?
I mean, so I never had an insurance background. And I started with our parent company, SmartVent, Foundation Flood Vent. And one of the things I did was, or what we do is sell through education. So I would do CE classes and stuff like that. And then, that was doing good. And I still do that because I definitely get business from it. But I wanted to do more. So I literally Googled how to get business as an insurance agent, because my parent company didn't really network. We sold through education. It's a building product manufacturer. So not really a reason to network. And I didn't work in any career before that had to do with networking or anything like that. I was always in a retail type environment. So I wasn't going out to get business. But I did have experience as a financial sales consultant with a bank in my when I was 18 to my early 20s. And I was in an in-store branch, which is like in a supermarket. So I was in like a ShopRite. And what really helped me was I was top sales in the region. I was on track to become a branch manager. And one of the reasons I was top sales was because like I would just walk around the supermarket and strike up conversations. Like I would see someone like looking at Fruity Pebbles and like I make a joke like, Fruity Pebbles, eh? And then they'd like kind of laugh or something. They'd be like, oh, my name's Tyler. And yeah, I work over at PNC or whatever. So that was like an easy thing for me. And I learned that, as an 18-year-old talking to like 50-year-olds looking at cereal. So I just Googled it and I was like, all right, I'm going to try this. I'm going to join Chambers because it says to join Chambers. And that's what I did. I'm going to do whatever. Go to these real estate events and do this and do that. So then I just started going, started meeting new people and everything like that. And then people would, reach out to me and want to set up one-to-ones. So I was like, all right, that's what we got to do. Once I meet people, I got to set up a one-to-one. So I kind of just learned it by other people doing it with me. And then, that went probably about 4 years, I'd say. So 2014, now we're at 2018. Yeah. And then I was like, I just would watch and everything at these events, and I would go to people's events, and I'm like, everybody is like thankful for the person who throws the event, like whether it be the Chamber or whether it be Jersey Man, everybody goes up to Ashley, awesome event, and I'm like, why don't I just have them thankful for me? Yeah. So I'm like, why don't I just start throwing my own events? Why don't I, to your point, bring value by, joining the YPN board and helping throw events and, doing all these different things, throwing my own coffee meetings and, doing my own things. And that's what I kind of did. And then I was able to bring people more together from a larger scale as opposed to me meeting someone in the one, which I still do, meet someone in one-to-one and introduce them to people. I always make sure to do that. But now I'm able to do it with 50 people at a time, on a monthly basis. So that's kind of was like my next level of bringing value and everything was, now transitioning into doing my own things, using those other platforms as kind of a feeder system to, grow my network, but help grow my network's network. And yeah, that's kind of where I went from there. And like I said, 90% of my business is from that. I still do events on my own. I kind of scaled back on some of the events that I go to only because it became a little bit redundant of the same people and everything like that, which is, good, forming relationships and everything. But also you got to kind of weigh your time and all that stuff. And that's the one thing too with networking is you got to network definitely to get business, but you also, there's like a fine line of like, doing it too much kind of thing to where you're not seeing like the benefit, directly. And you got to always like be willing to change, always be willing to like weigh your time to, how much it's worth and everything like that. Because in the networking world, you can easily fill up your time with, wasters of, this financial advisor or whatever wants to meet me for a one-to-one. And to your point, he's a sales guy. I know I'm not going to get nothing out of it. Like why am I going to do a one-to-one just because he's reaching out or, right. Whatever. So you got to be able to gauge your time and see where it is in the tank to, kind of go from there.
Yeah.
But
I would say, and a few like tactical takeaways for folks, especially if you're newer to business development and you're doing that. I always say to folks, like if you're nervous going into the room, first thing is show up early. There's nothing better than being one of the first people there for two reasons. One, you get to know the people who are hosting the event. Usually they have their table set up with the sign-up sheet or, with the name tags, whatever it is. And they know everybody who's going to be in attendance. So if you sit there, maybe help them set up, you're already going to be on a good foot with them. They're going to help make some intros for you to ensure you enjoy the event. But two, rather than walking, like I said, my first time, I'm habitually about 15 minutes late to everything except for, meetings and meals. But for the networking thing, I typically am a few minutes late. And when that happens, when you walk into a room of 250, like I said, it can be a little overwhelming, where if you're in the room as 1 and then 5 and then 10 and then 20, it just makes it easier to break the ice. Yeah. 2 would be, like I said, using the bar method of standing in line at the bar. There's always people that are thirsty. So people are going to be standing there. You got somebody in front and behind, and it's easier to break that ice with them. If you can, bring a little value, the nice thing is then they're probably there with somebody they know. They're going to introduce you to them, and it expands. one thing I always struggled with that I'll help, a little fun fact, is breaking the conversation. Sometimes you get like stuck in that and you're like, all right, this really isn't going anywhere. And I found that you have to empower other people. You thank them for their time, let them know I had a goal of meeting 4 or 5 people tonight. Is there anybody in this room that you think I should get to know? So now you're kind of putting it back on them. You're acknowledging the fact that you appreciate the time they spent with you. And you're also now asking them, hey, who's in your network, who's also in this room that it might make sense for me to know? Because I am the worst at Irish goodbyes. My wife hates me for that. I got to say goodbye to everybody. It takes me 30 minutes to leave anywhere because I just have to shake hands, kiss babies.
Yeah.
And that was something I would catch myself in these conversations. So I tried to be more aware, and I found that. But to your point too, I think it's great to go to these big events and see people. You do after a while, again, you find a lot of the card pushers who are just there to hit their metrics. But doing the private events, I think, is the game changer, especially when they're more intimate. We do our private monthly cigar events, and we hand select people. So I go in with partners. I think, the coffee thing, I know you do solo, but a lot of your other things, you'll collaborate with people.
Yep.
So it helps when you have 3 or 4 people, carrying the burden or the cost of whatever it is. Now it's not as big a deal, but more importantly, it's not just your network that you're inviting. Now you have 3, 4 other people that are inviting people in their network that they know. We're looking for a specific quality of person as a decision maker. They're a giver, and they just they get it, so to speak. But I just think those are key things to do. And then to your point as well, I have I'm old school, so I still do like the Excel spreadsheets. But I have a tab for where each of the groups that I'm a part of, and I put in what the initial investment is, and then any money I spend throughout the year on it. But I also track who gives me business and what kind of business comes from that. So again, it's like you were saying, now we have an actual metric that we can measure and say, okay, my $1,500 investment in this group got me $11,000 last year. I am re-signing up for that. That's a good ROI. Or you might be like, man, I spent $3,000 on this one and didn't get a lick of business. Now, again, you got to give most things at least a year to see and develop those relationships. It's not going to usually happen right away. But those are just some things to keep in mind if you're networking or if you're trying to sell maybe your company on getting you into these different events. Those are just some tools to use.
Yeah, it's the one of our buddies always says it low and slow, right?
Low and slow, crock-pot method. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's that whole method. You're not going to go into an event and just run out with business. And also when weighing the value of that group or whatever, it doesn't necessarily have to be direct business. It could be somebody that you meet that introduces you to somebody who's now your biggest referral source. You know, so you never know kind of thing. It's spider webs, so you definitely got to keep that in mind as well. But another thing to go back on, and you're great at this, and you kind of brought it up with the whole, when I said that where was I going with that? when I said that. You're not just like, oh, how's business kind of thing. Yeah. You're getting into, you're forming that relationship and getting into more of that. Like who is that person, and not just what they do and how business is, because everybody's going to give you they're going to give you the same answer as good.
Yeah. Good or busy.
Yeah, but that's the busy too. Yeah. That's the other one. So, really finding those common denominators of, what's a common interest that I have with that person that I can connect on, because it just makes it so much easier to kind of get in with that person and form that relationship.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah. So like, for example, when I met you, we went to sports, then we went to shoes, then we went to golf, and we find all these common things, and we're like, he does a lot of the same stuff I do, and then naturally it kind of forms the relationship. So trying to dig deep and finding those things, and a good way to do that is maybe not at an event. You can talk through it somewhat at an event and kind of find that, and then I'll try to remember that for next time I see them. But definitely in the one-to-one, my goal in the one-to-one, and just some tips for people that are doing these one-to-ones or are trying to get into it, is I try to spend more time on that person than I spend on myself. I'll just go in hey, Justin, nice to see you, man. Thanks for coming to the one-to-one meeting. Tell me a little bit about yourself. When did you get started in the business? And so I kind of just hit them with a question and then let them just keep going, and then ask them another question that, steer in the conversation to where we need to go. And then naturally with the rule of reciprocity, then they're going to naturally ask there's similar questions back, or or if that person, I'll bring up like, what do you like to do in your free time, and they bring up, oh, I'm golfing, and I love golf. I was just at Riverwinds, earlier this week, and then you can kind of play off of that. So that's one thing with one-to-ones. You gotta try to dig in more than just like, what's the ideal client, and standard business questions.
I couldn't agree more, because again, it's all about like, know, and trust, right? I can't tell you how many times I have conversations with people, and I bring up that 2 of my 4 kids are on the autism spectrum, and like they either have a kid that's also on the spectrum, or they have a family member or a friend with it, and then like I can be that resource or that outlet. I can help them through whether they need ABA therapists, or they need like an attorney, or they just need somebody to talk to because they're not sure of what to do. Then out of nowhere, you build this rapport that has nothing to do with business, but it brings a whole nother set of value to people. And then, like you said, through the laws of reciprocity, then it's almost psychologically, they're like, man, Justin has done all these things for like the well-being of my family. He's going to be top of mind. When I hear the word payroll, I'm going to be like, oh, Justin's the man.
Right.
And they don't even have to fully understand what I do.
Yeah.
It's just that they know I'm the payroll guy, and they know that I'm there to help solve problems outside of just what I do for a living.
Yep.
And that's why I was saying you have to ask the right questions, because too often, there's going to be so many other levels. Like I think we both do a good job of that on social media. We share a lot about our lives because you might not need insurance right now, but you might need a gym, workout, or you might need some nutritional tips, or you might be into cars, or, all these things. So we give people kind of a catalog of items to talk to us about when they see us in public. Because how often does that happen to you? Somebody brings up a post and they're like, oh, I saw XYZ, or I saw that you guys were doing, or
I saw you move to Woodstown. Oh, I love it down there. Like,
and those are the ideal icebreakers, right? It's like you get to have a real conversation, because too often when it's just, what do you do for a living? It becomes just like superficial. Let's just both pretend like we're crushing it, because most people don't want to be vulnerable. And it's like, it's really a waste of everybody's time.
And then you just get lumped in with all the other payroll guys.
Exactly right.
The guy's a payroll guy. He does payroll. Everybody's going to say they do great at it.
Of course. Nobody's going to be like, you know what? Our systems kind of suck. I'm a really good sales guy, but I'm not going to service that client at all. So, you should send them to me, though. Like, oh, whatever. I'll pay you for it.
Right. Exactly. Like, that's it. You're not going to sell it yourself apart. Whereas, like, if you're helping them in other aspects of life, like you said, they're going to 100% think of you. And, we're testaments of it. Like, I know for a fact that I could show like messages of people that, will message off of like a gym post or something I do. Then it goes into, oh, how you been, man? And then it just kind of goes from there, or someone will reach out and say, oh, I just saw you post about that. Actually, I need my homeowners looked at. When I didn't even post about homeowners insurance, I was like talking about, whatever it was, like a car or something, know? So, that's definitely something to try, is dig deeper in your conversations, and don't just like stay at the surface. It's like the image of the iceberg that you always see. There's that little iceberg on the top, and then you look at the bottom, it's like massive.
Oh yeah. No, it's so true, because you don't know what's important to people. And if all I talk about is payroll, and that's not on your agenda at all, then again, it's just a waste. But if I ask you 13 questions and I find out that you have X, Y, and Z going on, and I can give you a resource, that's a real connection.
100%.
Like the business connections are cool, but it's like we've talked about before. I think I've used this saying, the deposits to the bank account compared to the deposits to the soul. There's something about being able to, really inject value back into somebody that's not your line of work. When you can help somebody with the fitness stuff, or you can help kind of talk a father, through like, this is what it's going to be like when you take your 4 kids to the beach. Like, it's just, those are like invaluable things. Like, there's no parenting handbook, right? So like you need sometimes that information from somebody. So don't be afraid to share, guys. Ask much better questions and get out there. Take the action.
Vulnerable.
Yeah, be vulnerable. It's vulnerable and authenticity, or vulnerability and authenticity, will always be the 2 things that win, because that's the differentiator. So many people wear masks, don't give you their authentic self, and eventually you get found out.
Yeah. I mean, like, an example is like, we as Americans love stories like Rudy, that vulnerable story of the guy who's not making it and then works his ass off and he got there. Whereas and Brady, same thing, high draft pick, become one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. But then, back to, we spoke about him before, or I think we were talking offline about like Johnny Football. Like people hated that guy because, he wasn't vulnerable. He was like, just kind of showing off and all that stuff. And, being vulnerable and that underdog type story, just we gravitate towards.
Absolutely.
As people.
Yeah, people want to root for that. The guy who's cocky and seems to be living a larger life than he is, we usually, we get turned off by that a lot of times.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. So, well, man, that was quick. We're pretty much here at time.
Yeah.
It was awesome doing it. Another episode with just me and you. So, just for the future, we're going to have some guests on in the next few, and, we'll try to make it a little bit of a habit to get just me and you in, because we didn't really touch too much into the network. And I mean, we kind of struck on a surface level.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, why don't you, anything to part with?
As always, friends, you know what it is. Best day ever. And make sure, like, subscribe, follow, do all the things. Favorite platform, YouTube. I prefer YouTube. I like seeing these handsome faces. I'm not going to lie. But the audio is probably pretty cool, too, if you don't have
I'm
the
an
time
audio
to stare.
guy. Yeah, I'm an audio guy because it's easy driving. Pull up your Spotify, pull up your Apple Podcasts, and give us a listen. If you heard something on one of the summary episodes that you liked, go back to that episode, give it a listen. It stands the test of time. It's not like we're going over news or stuff that, is stale. We're hitting on, many different points that you can definitely go back and listen and grab some stuff, some key points from, and, make sure you have your notebook with you, because I definitely learned a ton and all that good stuff. So
that's right. So thanks for being with us, Outliers. Make it the best day ever.
Best day ever, fam.